brilliant.
I'm satisfied.
These are like yes or no questions, and if Hillary gets enough yeses or noes, if she gets enough noes, 7 out of yeses, she'll win. 7 out of 13. If she gets enough noes, she won't. So the first one is her party holds more seats in Congress, and the answer is no, after the midterm elections. There is no major contest for the incumbent party nomination. You could call Bernie's challenge fairly major, couldn't you?
It's definitely more major than she anticipated.
-2 for Hillary. The sitting president is running for re-election. No, -3. She is a national hero or exceptionally charismatic.
Absolutely
No.
not. They're
-4.
two of the least popular politicians in the country.
Recent major domestic policy achievements are important, apparently, but the professor concludes there have been none in Obama's second term. -5. We're not
That's
doing
not
them.
looking good for her, is
No,
it?
well, we're not getting to the ones that Donald Trump will lose, but she needs to get to 7. Then it gets trickier. But she only needs to lose 2 more to lose the election. Short-term economic performance, the economy not in recession.
Where is America on the cycle at the moment?
She'll be crossing her fingers once it doesn't happen before
Yeah.
November. Major foreign policy successes. Can you think of any that Obama's had recently?
No, because she's been hammered with the whole Benghazi thing. Well, I mean, he could always point to the, I got rid of Osama bin Laden, if that's still got
That was a
legs.
while back, though, wasn't it?
It was, for sure.
Iran,
Iran, the deal with Iran, but that plays both ways in America, doesn't it?
Yeah. And the charisma of the challenger. So she isn't doing so well. I mean, it's possible she could be at -7 already, but... and we're not saying this is gospel, it's just his...
It's worked. We know it's worked.
Well, he reckons it has. The charisma of the challenger. Would you describe Donald Trump as a charismatic figure?
Anti-charisma.
But in the true sense of the word, unfortunately, he is. It's just that we don't like it.
Well, speak for yourself.
So anyway, although she seems to be a shoo-in, according to all the responsible political commentators, it may not be according to his.
What about the prospect that they both lose and there's no president?
Is there any chance that someone
Still
else
be
could
alright.
stand as an independent? Does it work like that over there, that you could just have
I think
someone sensible
That's
and
one of the
normal stand?
predictors. If there's a strong third candidate, an independent, it disrupts things. But there isn't this time.
No. So it may be a more interesting election than we think this far out.
I've long thought that it will be. I think that that the whole Trump phenomenon has disproved all of the conventional wisdom so far. I know he's up against it in conventional thinking terms, but the fact that he is actually in the race and is the likely candidate pretty much disproves all earlier predictions anyway.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. A woman named Emma Morano is now the oldest person in the world and says she's got this far by being single and eating raw eggs. And she is 116. Do you want to live, before we go tonight, to 116 if you can stay healthy?
I like how the fact is that she'd been in a bad marriage and she'd ditched him.
Yes,
and
she
said
ditched
that
him.
she wasn't interested in getting into another bad marriage.
That's right. So
That's
she
pretty
stayed
good advice, yeah.
She stayed single after that. She may be the last living person born in the 19th century.
That's right. And she ate raw eggs.
That's remarkable,
didn't
isn't it?
It is. The previous incumbent, Susanna Jones, who died a week ago, ate bacon every day, never drank alcohol or smoked, let alone on a night out in Melbourne. And she said, surround yourself with love and positive energy.
And she was wrong, because she died first.
Well, yes, she died first, but she was the holder of the title at the time. How much do you think about longevity and whether you can enhance
she?
yours?
What is it about this show? Last time I was on it, we were discussing mortality. Would you rather flame out brilliantly and die young or live a long time?
But imagine what your house would be worth in Auckland when you're 116.
We like to do the metaphysical issues here.
Yeah. I'm all for living as long as possible, actually. But yes, quality of life has got to be so important, doesn't it? And I mean, I think that we know
She's obviously got all her marbles still, doesn't she?
Yeah, and the chances are she's probably eaten quite well and had a bit of physical exercise most of her life. And
That's
that
a
will have-
lot of eggs, though,
That's
isn't
what
it?
got her through.
And it probably boils down to...
It's not rocket science.
Finlay McDonald, very nice to have you on the panel again.
Thank you very much for making me think about the big issues again, Jim.
Linda, Helen and you too. That's us for another week. Thank you, everybody. And Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, Paula Bennett tells us there is no housing crisis. We asked the Salvation Army what they're seeing out in the field, the wreckage in the sea that wasn't from flight MS-804, the search for the Egypt airplane, and for answers about how it disappeared from radar screens and from the sky. The fishing industry swings into damage control. A famous Scottish golf course votes no to female members and gets put in the bunker. And 75 years on from the Battle of Crete. All of that and more coming up in the next 89 and a bit minutes. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, says there is no housing crisis in New Zealand and ongoing problems have been the case for some time. Yesterday, RNZ reported that officials from the Ministry of Social Development told the Minister a year ago that the emergency housing sector was incoherent, unfair and unaccountable. Ms Bennett says there's always been people in need and the sector is not in crisis. She says many of the homeless have mental health or alcohol and drug issues that need to be worked on over time. Ms Bennett says Housing New Zealand has been given more money to provide more housing. She says she doesn't believe the situation is getting worse. As the search continues for the wreckage from the Egypt airplane that vanished over the eastern Mediterranean, the French authorities are trying to discover whether there was a security breach in Paris. The aircraft had been en route from Paris to Cairo with 66 people on board. The BBC's Jonathan Blake reports.
The focus here is on what, if any, breach of security happened at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Security was already tight and under review after last year's terror attacks in Paris. Since then, some airport staff have had security clearance revoked over fears of links to Islamic extremists. A lawyer who represented some of those staff, Eric Moutet, told BBC Newsnight, "There is effectively recruitment going on at the airports. That is clear. There are people who are being radicalised in some of the trade unions. The authorities have their work cut out with this problem."
Jonathan Blake reporting. 7 new charter schools are to be established with funding to be included in next week's budget. The Under-Secretary to the Minister of Education, David Seymour, says there will be enough money to set up about 7 of the schools in 2018 and 2019. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Mr Seymour says the funding follows strong interest from organisations wanting to set up the schools. He says the 8 existing schools are getting good results, with Education Review Office reports and an independent evaluation all positive. Mr Seymour says the government will also spend $500,000 to create a new body that will advise and support the schools. The Post-Primary Teachers Association and the Green Party say there's little proof that charter schools are working well and the government should not be funding more of them. This is John Gerritsen.
The Ministry of Social Development is helping the police with a fraud investigation into a disbanded Auckland budgeting service which receives state funding. The Otara budgeting service stopped operating last year. Sharon Brett-Kelly reports.
The ministry says it gave the Otara budgeting service nearly $40,000 for the last financial year, but the service lost its membership with the Federation of Family Budgeting Services last November and ended its contract with the ministry in December. A ministry spokesperson says the service met its contract obligations and it's satisfied the money was used for the right purposes. All of the Otara services clients have been picked up by the Mangere Budgeting Services Trust. In Auckland, Sharon Brett-Kelly.
The Queenstown Lakes District Council has admitted that glass from residents' recycling bins is going to landfill. The Deputy Mayor and Infrastructure Team Leader, Lyle Cox, says a communication glitch meant residents were not told that was happening. Mr Cox says the market for recycled mixed glass has dropped to the point where contractors can't sell it, so it's being used as landfill until a solution can be found. The council's looking at ways to separate different coloured glass at the curbside. In Wanaka, part of the same council territory, glass is already separated and is being recycled. Environmental groups will meet with the council next week to ask for reassurances that a solution will be found. The man accused of murdering a woman by running her down in a car in Wellington can now be named. He's 58-year-old Mark Stevens. He previously had interim name suppression, but that lapsed this afternoon. Mr Stevens has pleaded not guilty to murdering Delia Grace Williams, who was 55. Ms Williams died after being hit by a car in the suburb of Northland in March. Mr Stevens also pleaded not guilty to using a motor vehicle as a weapon and drink driving when he appeared in the High Court at Wellington earlier this week. His next appearance is in July. In sport, the New Zealand golfer Danny Lee is in a three-way tie for the lead at the latest PGA Tour event in Texas. Lee shot a bogey-free 7-under 63 in the opening round. Fellow New Zealander Tim Wilkinson is 4 shots back in a tie for 28th. Meanwhile, the women's world number 1 Lydia Ko will need an improved second round if she's to avoid missing the cut on the LPGA Tour. Ko fired an opening round 2-over par 73 at the Kingsmill Championship to sit tied for 81st. The Crusaders are preparing for a tough, possibly brutal clash with the Waratahs in Christchurch tonight. The two sides clashed in a sometimes spiteful match in Sydney last year, which effectively ended the Crusaders' bid for a playoff spot. New Crusaders prop Mike Alatoa, who spent 2 years with the Waratahs, know they have to be disciplined in what will be a rugged forward battle.
Probably how we deal with their physicality will be the biggest thing, I reckon, because they are a very physical team. They'll want to come out and be really aggressive, and it's, I guess, how we match that will be the most important thing for us, I reckon.
Crusaders prop Mike Alatoa. The Kiwis playmaker Kieran Foran is set to return to the National Rugby League competition after spending the past 3 weeks in rehabilitation. Foran was granted leave by his Parramatta Eels club to deal with personal issues. The Eels play the Melbourne Storm on Monday night. That's the news.
On Nights Tonight, a sonic tonic to set you up for the weekend, all about the colour and emotion blue. Dave Raish joins us to talk international sport, Algerian soccer, the Europa League final, and doping and the Olympics. The Country Life team with more stories from beyond the city limits, and we wind up with a Friday musical finale that will get you set for the weekend. It's all on Nights Tonight after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Periods of rain tomorrow with possible squally thunderstorms. Gale southwesterlies in Auckland and Northland. Later tomorrow, possibly severe. Waikato to Kapiti, including the Central High Country. Rain spreading north today with squally thunderstorms in western areas. Rain then gradually easing from the south tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional rain tomorrow. Wellington, Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Rain at times, clearing tomorrow and becoming fine apart from a few showers lingering in Banks Peninsula and Wairarapa. Southwest gales for coastal Canterbury tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain and squally thunderstorms, clearing in Fiordland this evening and becoming fine everywhere tomorrow. Otago and Southland, showers clearing this afternoon, then returning overnight. And the Chatham Islands, rain and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. It's 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Busy old checkpoint tonight. In a moment, Paula Bennett saying there is no housing crisis in New Zealand. We're going to talk to the Salvation Army a couple of times tonight about what they're seeing in West Auckland, Waitakere, who is using their services. All of that coming up in about 3 minutes. But first, quickly, Egyptian officials have now withdrawn those claims that wreckage from the missing Egypt airplane had been found, saying the debris that was spotted in the ocean is not from MS-804. The flight, as we know, was travelling from Paris to Cairo with 66 people on board. It went off the radar in Egyptian airspace over the Mediterranean Sea. Here's Sharon Brett Kelly.
Scouring the Mediterranean in a desperate search for the wreckage of missing Egypt air flight MS-804. Egyptian military released video of the ongoing sea and air search. The captain of a Greek frigate described finding floating material, including a blue and white life jacket and a chair thought to have come from the Airbus A320. But Egyptian Air has since ruled this out and the search continues. The plane, carrying 66 passengers and crew, was travelling from Paris to Cairo when it lost contact with air traffic control and is believed to have crashed into the ocean 370 kilometres southeast of Crete in Egyptian airspace. The Greek Defence Minister, Panos Kamenos, says the plane swerved mid-air before plunging from a cruising height of 37,000 feet.
At 3:37, the plane, which was 10 to 15 miles inside Egyptian airspace in the flight information region of Egypt at 37,000 feet, made a 90-degree turn to the left and then a 360-degree turn towards the right, descending from 37,000 feet to 15,000 feet, where the picture we had was lost at 10,000 feet.
Under aviation rules, Egyptian authorities are taking the lead in the search. The French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault said his country would assist.
We are available to the Egyptian authorities and ready to send our military means, our planes, our boats, to help in the search for this plane.
The passengers on board MS-804 were from 12 different countries and included 2 babies and a child. As their relatives gathered at Paris and Cairo airports, White House spokesman Josh Earnest offered his condolences to the families.
The President, as you all are aware, has received multiple updates from his national security team on this situation. U.S. national security and aviation experts have been in touch with their counterparts in France and Egypt to offer assistance. Many of you all have probably also seen the announcement from the Department of Defense that the United States Navy is working to deploy a P-3 Orion aircraft to provide support for the search of the missing jetliner. At this point, Darlene, to go straight to your question, it's too early to definitively say what may have caused this disaster. The investigation is underway, and investigators will consider all of the potential factors that could have contributed to the crash. And obviously, if there's an opportunity for the United States government to support those efforts, then we will do that.
Egypt's Prime Minister Sharif Ismail said terrorism was a more likely reason for the plane to crash than a technical fault. It follows serious concerns about security at the country's airports after a bomb was smuggled aboard a Russian Airbus last October. That aircraft exploded mid-air shortly after leaving the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, killing all 224 on board. Islamic State later claimed responsibility. For Checkpoint, Sharon Brett Kelly.
12 minutes past 5. Let's head home now, where the issue to the fore this week has been homelessness. In a moment, we do talk to Paula Bennett. On Checkpoint this week, we've spoken to people living in their cars, homeless people whose WINS-approved emergency housing is costing them up to $1,300 a week. And we've heard of overcrowding, long waiting lists and desperation. Today I went to the Salvation Army in Waitakere, West Auckland, to talk to people with a long history of helping those in need. Rhonda Middleton has been the operations manager for the Salvation Army in Henderson for 15 years. She says the situation is as bad as she's ever seen, and a striking change is the number of working poor they're dealing with. Where once fewer than 1 in 10 of the people seeking their help had a job, now it's as much as a third. Rents are simply too high for people to have much money at all left over. Now, we're going to hear from Rhonda at length after 6 o'clock on Checkpoint tonight. The interview will also be available online. But right now, before the Minister, a small example. Lockers for the homeless. The Salvation Army wants to get everyone indoors, but they can't. And so for the people sleeping rough in West Auckland, they've put lockers up outside their building so they can keep their few possessions dry and safe.
These are lockers for homeless people?
Yes, yeah. So we just got them in last week, and we've been working with the homeless guys in West Auckland for about 6 months to work to come to a place where we can actually get lockers for them to store their gear, because we can't give them houses at the moment. We're trying, but we can't find them. But how can we give them a place that's theirs? And they can store their stuff and it can keep dry. And then they even would say, we fight over things, we just need our own place. And so a simple solution to us was, let's try and get some lockers in. And we did a thing called 14 Hours Homeless last year. We got lots of people involved and we fundraised for a project that the rough sleepers told us this is the thing we want. And so we made it happen.
I find it a bit bittersweet, because on the one hand this is wonderful because they can keep things dry here, they can keep their treasures here if they've got any treasures, but on the other hand we shouldn't need this stuff, should we?
Oh no, I totally agree, but I don't have the answer to the housing issue. It's a lot bigger than what I can do. We can do one client at a time. We can try and find housing or boarding houses for the rough sleepers, but the thing that is important to me is if we can do some simple things, if we can put those into action and they know that we're listening to them, then we'll do that while we're waiting for the housing crisis to sort itself out.
Rhonda Middleton, who is the operations manager for the Henderson Salvation Army. That is the closest Salvation Army office to Paula Bennett's electorate office. We're going to talk to Rhonda at length after 6 o'clock about who is using their services and why. Checkpoint has repeatedly asked for Social Housing Minister Paula Bennett to come on the program this week to address the emergency housing issue, if indeed there is one, and also to discuss the sale of a state house in Queenstown yesterday. A couple of things we wanted to discuss, the kind of emergency housing costs that we saw in Takanini earlier in the week. Lots to talk about. That invitation has been declined 4 days in a row. Today she was visiting Queenstown as Associate Tourism Minister, and our reporter based there, Peter Newport, managed to get to her and ask her if she believes there is a housing crisis.
Well, look, for me, I've been worried about this situation since I've been the Social Housing Minister. Prime Minister gave a speech in January last year where we said that emergency housing was part of the bigger picture of where we saw part of the problem. But actually, for me, I have to have fixes not just at the emergency end, but along that kind of whole pipeline through to social housing, through to affordable housing, through to more supply. So I'm not sure it is a lot worse right now, and I've been acutely aware of it for a long period of time, hence a whole lot of the funding that we put in right from the beginning of last year and the most recent announcements.
But there do seem to be dots that aren't connected. For example, the sale of the Housing New Zealand property in Queenstown yesterday. Housing New Zealand said there were 2 people on the waiting list. In reality, there were over 300 people looking for a roof over their heads.
Well, no, they were 300 people that wanted to get into an affordable house, and they had more of a rent-to-buy scheme. So, you know what, they actually do an outstanding job, by the way, the Queenstown Lakes Community Trust. I've been associated with them, we've helped them with funding in the past, so I think they're great. But what they've got is people that want to rent off them, save money towards buying a more affordable home, and I'm not surprised. In fact, I'm surprised they've only got 300. I would have thought they'd have more. As far as the numbers that need a social house and are on our waiting register, it is 2 or 3. We don't need that house. Why wouldn't we sell it and then put it into some of the really acute areas that have certainly been on your radio station all week and I'm really aware of?
But the stories are coming in every day of people living in cars and garages, Tauranga, Christchurch, Queenstown, Auckland. It does seem to be a national problem.
Certainly, I reckon that you've got people that are getting into debt, that are getting them into situations. Landlords get to be a bit more picky. I've got to say, from a social housing perspective in Housing New Zealand, we are less tolerable of inappropriate behaviour and violent behaviour. So we certainly are kicking more people out than we used to. So, you know, I won't actually see staff being beaten up. No, we will not allow pee to be smoked and manufactured in our houses, and people will be kicked out. So, you know, I think that there are a range of things that are happening, but there are some people who most certainly are living in unsafe conditions that I'm not happy about and do not find tenable.
Do you think it's time to accept that market forces aren't working and some social engineering is required?
What I will say, it's time that we accepted, is that there are people that are in social housing that shouldn't be there. So it is not a home for life. Actually, there are some people whose circumstances change, and I'm not sure we've got the right incentives in place to see people bettering their lives, moving out of these houses and freeing them up for families that are in real dire straits because of a series of circumstances. Hence, we're doing tenancy reviews. You know, 672 people have moved on, more than 10% of them moved on to go and purchase their own home. It's why we do the housing support products, which is something new I introduced. So that means if someone's in real trouble, we're paying their rent, we'd rather help them at that point than have them move out and then us have to try and find them a social house. So we've put more than $1.5 million into that. So there's a whole series of things, let alone the rebuild that's going on within Housing New Zealand, which is literally nearly 600 houses that are already in construction and consented.
Nevertheless, there is a building impression there is a national housing crisis and a social crisis. Is that something you deny?
Well, I certainly wouldn't call it a crisis. You know, I think that we've always had people in need. So the other night on TV, I heard the homeless story was, you know, sort of second in, and then the 7th story was a man who'd been 30 years living on the street. So that's decades. You know, for some people it has been intergenerational. It is alcohol and drug. It is mental health issues. It's the huge, huge issues that you have to work with over a period of time. So we're providing more for night shelters so that that we can put people up in those emergencies. But for me, it really, I know I get a bit of stick for saying pipeline, but it's how do we then move them on to a more permanent home? How do we get aspirational for those young families? And there are some really good products out there that are working. It's just not a click of my fingers overnight.
Do you personally want to do more?
Oh, always. So I spend the bulk of my time on social housing issues and driving my department into seriously thinking about different ways that we can tackle this. Hence opening more money up to community housing providers so it's not just purely government. But when you're at 90, so when the Greens come out with a great policy, they're going to build 450 more. Well, where? So that means they're going to take the one house that's on the big section. So where are you going to put those people that are in that one house? You've then got a whole consenting program to go through. You're then hopefully going to be putting at least 6 on there, which, by the way, we're doing every week of every month of this year and last and the one before. But there's actually a real process that you have to go through. You've got NIMBYism, so the people next door are saying we don't want 6 social houses next to us, so they make the consenting process hard. It is, as I say, you've got to constantly be pulling a whole lot of levers, which we are. And what also gets me is it's not about the money. If we could give Housing New Zealand a heap of more money, they've still got consenting issues, they've still got to find temporary houses for those that've got to move out to then do the building program. So it is a whole moving feast that we're trying to keep our hands on.
And do you think on the basis of that just maybe one minister needs to take a leadership role? Is that possible for you to do?
Yeah, well, I do. So I am the Minister of Social Housing, and I by far take the leadership role on anything that's around social housing. Nick Smith does affordable, and I think that's a great way with that building and housing, and quite frankly, Bill's more of our mentor that sits there and is trying to drive, sort of better activity in the asset use of Housing New Zealand. But he would tell you that I take the lead on all of this, and I think that's the right way to go.
Paula Bennett taking the lead on all of this. She was talking to our reporter Peter Newport, who found her in Queenstown this morning. We have asked to talk to the Minister on Checkpoint all week. We will have more on that issue after 6 o'clock. We're going to spend a bit of time with the Salvation Army in Waitakere talking to them about who uses them straight after the 6 o'clock news. Coming up on Checkpoint, the Queenstown Lake District Council admits glass from residents' recycling bins is not being recycled at all. Next week's budget will include funding for more charter schools. We'll speak to David Seymour about how that's going. In Scotland's legendary Muirfield Golf Course will not be allowed to host the British Open after a bid to allow women to join the club failed. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Feel free to contact us by text. You just text from your phone to 2101. You can email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, or you can use our Facebook or Twitter feeds to be in touch with us. We do appreciate your feedback and we would love to hear from you tonight. The fishing industry has swung into damage control mode, contacting top customers like McDonald's after revelations of fish dumping and other illegal behaviour in the sector. Fast food chain McDonald's is coming under pressure from campaigners to remove hoki fish from its menu if environmental standards are not being met. Today, Seafood New Zealand launched a counterattack describing an international report by the Universities of British Columbia, Oxford and Auckland as a politically motivated attempt to embarrass the government. Political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
The Chief Executive of Seafood NZ, Tim Pankhurst, says the Sea Around Us report, which alleged massive fish dumping and under-reporting of catch over many decades, is a highly politicised document written by activist academics with an anti-fishing agenda. Mr Pankhurst says it's being seized upon by opposition parties and green imperialists who had a heads up it was coming and who are determined to embarrass the government and weaken commercial fishing.
The report wasn't made known to MPI and NIWA in the government, but it was discussed in the Labour caucus on Sunday. The whole point of science is to put data before opinion. What we're seeing here is the reverse of that.
Mr Pankhurst says Seafood NZ has been in contact with its suppliers this week, including McDonald's, because the report's claims are potentially very damaging.
Issued them with the various reports and facts and so on, but we haven't had any concern made known to us by any of those outlets.
Just days after the Sea Around Us report came out, the Ministry for Primary Industries was forced to order an independent investigation into its own actions. One of its internal fishing investigations, Operation Achilles, was leaked, showing the ministry wasn't prosecuting skippers who were illegally dumping fish on a major scale. MPI investigators even questioned whether the ministry was perverting the course of justice. Mr Pankhurst says he is concerned about this.
Yes, indeed, and I think any untoward activities do need to be investigated.
But Greenpeace New Zealand's Executive Director Russell Norman says Mr Pankhurst can't have it both ways.
The fact is that the Auckland University report showed large levels of dumping and non-reporting, and then the Ministry of Primary Industries reports showed large levels of dumping and non-reporting of catch. These things are entirely consistent, and the seafood industry would do better just to read the reports.
The Wildlife Conservation Group, WWF New Zealand's head of campaigns, Peter Hardstaff, says Mr Pankhurst's statements are just nonsense.
You'd think that Seafood New Zealand, you'd think that the New Zealand fishing industry would be looking at us and thinking, it's time to wake up, guys, it's time to get onto this issue. The credibility of New Zealand's fishing industry is at stake.
Mr Hardstaff also wants the inquiry into MPI to investigate why the death of a Hector's dolphin was never reported by the ministry. Operation Achilles revealed the ministry knew a skipper caught and killed 2 Hector's dolphins in their nets, but one was floated back out to sea. Mr Hardstaff says it's almost impossible to protect endangered species when their deaths aren't reported. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
26 minutes past 5. The Minister, Paula Bennett, has just tweeted me. John Campbell, the question was, is there a national housing crisis? No, not in all New Zealand, but 41 million in emergency housing is because we know it is needed. That from Paula Bennett about 4 minutes ago. 26 and a half minutes past 5. A bid to allow women to join the golf club at Scotland's legendary and very male Muirfield course has failed. It means the course will be removed from the list of venues eligible to host the sport's oldest major championship, the Open. After a 2-year consultation process of the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, members, all of whom are men obviously enough, voted to maintain the all-male membership policy. Sports editor Stephen Hewson, who is, we should point out, a man, as am I, obviously, reports.
For one of the finest final rounds in Open Championship history on the way. Oh, that goes down! Yes, the double fist pump for Lefty. One hand on the claret jug, the other on his 5th major championship.
Muirfield last hosted the Open in 2013 when American Phil Mickelson won. But it'll be a while before the championship returns, with the sport's guardians, the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St Andrews, removing Muirfield's hosting rights. The all-male membership policy has been in place since the club was founded in 1744. The club captain, Henry Fairweather, explains how the vote went.
A majority of members voted for women as members of the club, but the 2/3 majority that we require for a change in the rules was not met. Women will continue to be welcome at Muirfield on the course and in the clubhouse as guests and as visitors, and indeed we have some ladies playing here today.
Henry Fairweather says the club committee had urged members to vote to overturn the policy.
I am disappointed because the committee and I recommended that members should vote in favour of the admission of women, but we respect the views of the members, and I'm delighted that we've had such a high turnout in the vote.
The veteran BBC golf commentator Peter Ellis says the issue is an emotive one, but maintains women can still play at the club.
The women who are their wives as husbands, they get all the facilities. If somebody wants to join, well, you better get married to somebody who's a member. I believe that clubs were formed years ago by people of like spirit, doctors, lawyers, accountants, bakers, butchers, whatever they like, and they joined in like spirit to talk amongst them, to do whatever.
But opposition to the policy has been swift. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says she wants the decision overturned.
The decision is wrong and it's indefensible. Muirfield is a private club. They are in charge of their own rules and regulations. I accept that. But this is 2016. Scotland has women leaders in every walk of life. So I think this decision is wrong, and I hope there is a way of looking at it again and overturning it.
The men's world number 3, Rory McIlroy's called on Muirfield to see sense.
We're in a day and age where it's not right to host the world's biggest golf tournament at a place that doesn't allow women to be members. So, hopefully, Muirfield can maybe see some sense.
The former New Zealand professional Frank Nobilo, who now works as a television commentator, has applauded the decision to strip Muirfield of its open status.
We know how great a golf course Muirfield is, but if they're not going to open it up to everybody, then I think that's imperative for golf. We want golf to be available to as many people, irrespective of their sex, as possible. So I think this was a very, very important day, very important move. I feel sorry for Muirfield that they don't want to do what everybody else is doing, but time to look ahead, not behind.
Royal Troon Golf Club, which is also in Scotland and will host this year's tournament in July, is now the only open venue not to permit women as members, although it's currently deciding whether to change its all-male membership policy. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
5:30. Katrina is on that side and Nona on that side, both very heartened by the fact they can feel free to marry a member. That must be very exciting for you both. Coming up on Checkpoint, reports of bad weather and heavy flooding on the West Coast. We're going to go there. Next week's budget will include funding for about 7 more charter schools in 2018 and 19. David Seymour is going to join us after business news. At least one more former Chibok schoolgirl abducted by Boko Haram militants in 2014 has been found. And if you live in Queenstown, we'll tell you where your glass recycling ends up. But here's a clue, it's not being recycled. All of that and more in the next half hour. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Egypt's aviation minister says a terrorist attack is more likely than a technical failure in the disappearance of an Egypt air flight over the Mediterranean Sea, but it's too early to rule out any explanation. The Airbus A320 vanished from radar on a flight between Paris and Cairo yesterday and is believed to have gone down somewhere off the Greek islands. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, says there is no housing crisis in New Zealand and existing problems have been around for some time. Yesterday, RNZ reported that officials from the Ministry of Social Development told the Minister a year ago that the emergency housing sector was incoherent, unfair and unaccountable. Paula Bennett says there's always been people in need and she doesn't believe the situation is getting any worse. Teacher and principal groups are unhappy with the government's decision to fund more charter schools. The Undersecretary to the Minister of Education says next week's budget will be including enough money to set up about 7 of the publicly funded private schools in 2018 and 2019. The Ministry of Social Development is helping the police with a fraud investigation into a disbanded Auckland budgeting service which received state funding. The Otara budgeting service stopped operating last year. The ministry says it gave the service nearly $40,000 but is satisfied the money was used for the right purposes. The police have arrested a 5th person over the assault of a 19-year-old woman who was found unconscious on the side of the road in Dome Valley, north of Auckland, 11 days ago. A 33-year-old man has appeared in the North Shore District Court charged with kidnapping. The woman remains in Auckland Hospital in a serious but stable condition. It is coming up to 27 minutes to 6. I'll be back at 6 o'clock with more news, sport and weather.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. And migration levels keep hitting fresh records, Nona.
That's right. 21 months in a row we've hit record highs, yeah.
Well, so every month for the past 21 months
yes, that's
has
right.
been higher than the preceding month.
Exactly. Yeah, we're talking what? A net gain, annual net gain of 68,100 people. That's
Right.
a lot of people.
Do we know where they're going? I mean, is this the answer to? I mean, are they mostly going to Auckland, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I guess they are. And I suppose, with the housing issues that we've been talking about, I dare say they're probably having a hard time finding a place to live.
Exactly. And the other thing is that as migrants, they're not foreign buyers because they're New Zealanders, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, some of them are. I mean, some of them are just people who are moving here, but may not be New Zealanders. And one of the things that we have seen is a very strong rise in visitor numbers.
Yeah.
More than 250,000 people arrived here in April. Yeah, so we're up to 3.27 million visitors to the year to date.
Wow, that's rising fast, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and 40% increase in visitors from China. So huge numbers of visitors coming here. And I guess the accommodation is also stretched too. Yeah,
absolutely,
So,
which is what we've been talking about in Queenstown this week.
Well, that's right.
Although you can't have it both ways. I mean, gosh, they're welcome tourists, aren't they?
well, tourism is an important sector of the economy. We need it, and it's because, well, that leads us very well into our next subject.
Go, Nona.
Dairy. That's what we're going to talk about now. So coming up this week, we got Fonterra. We're hoping that Fonterra is going to come up with their new forecast Farmgate milk payment to farmers. The market, analysts are looking at it. They're thinking like $4.50, which is up from $3.90 where we're at right now. Why, you say? Why would it go up?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I mean, that's quite a big movement, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's an expectation, but I have to say it's a fairly hopeful story here, that production is going to fall. It's going to fall anyway because of the wintering season, and then the European season comes with winter as well. So we see always during the winter months a decrease in production, milk production. However, they're also, hoping that supply will pick up, and so it remains to be seen whether or not that in fact happens.
So this is a classic supply and demand scenario, isn't it?
It's always the same story, and
absolutely.
we've had this issue for a while. We're talking about commodity price. It's always about supply and demand, and in this case, it's an important issue for New Zealand because dairy is such a big part of our economy, right?
Yeah. Dairy and tourism, they're the big two, right? 1 and 2, and they swap positions, don't they? They go back and forth in terms of
And so right now, tourism is a very important one, and of course, it's great that we're having these big numbers. Migration is also another big one. And of course, isn't that interesting that the other issue, of course, we talk about is housing. So it all kind of fits together.
Okay.
What do we got here? Yeah.
Markets.
Yeah.
Have you got more?
I can talk about anything.
Yeah, I know. You're fantastic.
What else do you want to talk about? No, we can talk about the market. The market was actually a little changed. It just rose 6 points to 6,910. I guess the big company report today was Ryman Healthcare.
Yep.
And I was at their result this morning, and really big numbers there. So, yeah, they're doing great. 26% increase in their net profit. Underlying profit up 16%.
Wow.
Really big numbers. And again, not just property valuation increases in their case, but we've seen quite a lot of that this week. We had Augusta also report today. Big increases in property valuations.
Right, how did the market finish? Well, no, you told us that. How did the dollar finish the week?
And the dollar is trading at 67.6 US cents and 93.5 Australian. And of course, part of that, the reason why the New Zealand dollar is down against the US is because there's a renewed expectation that the US Federal Reserve will finally hike interest rates. Yes, in June, perhaps.
Nona Peltier, thank you so much, Nona. We appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend.
And you.
Nona Peltier, our Auckland-based business reporter. In a moment, David Seymour talking partnerships, schools, but at least one more former Chibuk schoolgirl abducted by Boko Haram militants in 2004 has been found. Sarah Luka was rescued yesterday during a military operation against the ISIS-affiliated militants. It comes after the first of the kidnapped Chibuk girls to gain freedom met the Nigerian president. Here's Mana Rabi from Reuters.
For more than 2 years, the world wondered where she was. Now Amina Ali is in the global spotlight, the first of Nigeria's so-called Chibok schoolgirls to gain freedom. Soon after she was found on Tuesday, she was whisked away to the capital Abuja, where she met President Muhammadu Buhari, and he got to meet her 4-month-old daughter. Amina is one of 219 schoolgirls taken by Boko Haram militants from their school in Chibok in April 2014. The priority now, Buhari says, is Amina's reintegration into society.
The continuation of Amina's education, so abruptly disrupted, will definitely be a priority of the federal government. Amina must be able to go back to school.
The mass kidnapping stirred international outrage and inspired the Bring Back Our Girls movement. The exact circumstances of Amina's newfound freedom are unclear. The army says she was rescued in the Boko Haram stronghold of remote northeast Borno, but a parents' association said she'd simply been found. A man the government says is a suspected Boko Haram fighter was with Amina and her baby, claiming to be the girl's husband. He's been detained. President Buhari, a former military ruler, has struggled to crush the Boko Haram insurgency. With Amina's appearance, he's ordered army rescue squads to move into the militants' last great stronghold in Borno State, where they hope to finally bring the other Chibok girls home.
Report from Reuters. The time is 20 to 6. That's material because the owners of the Scenic Hotel Group say they will sue the Labour leader Andrew Little for defamation. Earl and Lani Hageman told Mr Little he had until 5 o'clock today, so 39 minutes ago, to apologise for comments he made about them in the media. They say they've received no apology and that they will now see Mr Little in court. Mr Little asked the Auditor-General to investigate after Earl Hageman donated $101,000 to the National Party in September 2014. The following month, the Scenic Hotel Group was awarded a government contract to manage the Matavai Resort in Niue. The Hagemans have also welcomed an investigation by the Auditor-General. Mr Little says he's written to the Hagemans' lawyer saying he has a constitutional duty to challenge the actions of the government over the expenditure of public funds. He says he will address the issues raised by the Hagemans once the Auditor-General has dealt with the issue. Right, ACT's charter policy, partnership school policy, whatever you want to call it, has been controversial, to say the least. The Labour Party is putting forward a bill to abolish the schools, but just today a substantial expansion of the policy was announced. Next week's budget will include funding for about 7 of the publicly funded private schools in 2018-19. That's on top of the 8 charter schools that already exist. It was 9, but Whangaruru was closed. The Undersecretary to the Minister of Education, ACT leader David Seymour, joins us on the phone now. Are you there, David?
Good afternoon, John.
Nice to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
And can I just give you one little piece of information?
Fire away.
I've come across, which is that yesterday the Māori Party announced that they would vote, along with ACT National, to vote down Chris Hipkins' Labour Party abolish partnership schools bill. And so we're very happy about that. It gives certainty to the policy. But I think there's also something in there.
Sorry, forgive me. OK, so you've got the Māori Party, ACT and National. Where's Peter Dunn on this? Has he said which way he's going?
Peter Dunn's never expressed a strong view, but he has voted against the legislation when he's had an opportunity. OK, I've got the Principals Association here, I've got New Zealand First here, I've got Labour here saying we hate it. We don't want these partnership schools. We don't see the point of them. Why is this so polarised? Why do you think they're good? Well, let me just take a step back. I'll tell you why they're so polarising. I could make this the most popular policy in New Zealand tomorrow by saying all partnerships must employ all teachers on unionised contracts. But we're not going to do that because it's the flexibility these schools have that make them different and help them to engage kids. Now, why do I think they're good? Well, because we're seeing the evidence all around us, a very diverse range of schools. Today I was at Vanguard Military School. They have a very strict military ethos. It's not a school that I personally would have thought of, but it works. It engages these kids, and their pass rates for NCA level 1, 2 and 3 last year were 193, 100, and in many cases with kids who had not been going to school previously. On the flip side, Sita Salupe runs Rise Up in Mangere. She had been running an after-school care for kids in her neighbourhood, and then when she got the opportunity to set up a school, she did. And again, their results are way above average, and they're focused entirely
And then on the other hand, we have Whangaruru, which you have admitted previously on this program was a dismal failure and should have been closed. So, and now we have, so you've got the authorisation board, now we have a new thing called the advisory board, which does look to me, on the face of it, to be another safety net, a manifestation of someone's concern or misgivings after Whangaruru. Why do you need that?
Well, people have tried to portray that as a response to Whangaruru. I mean, we don't make the policy in response to 1 out of the 8 schools. The reason that we have introduced this is that it is part of what I like to call the ecosystem of any charter school system. So in New York, they have the New York Charter Centre. In London, they have the New Schools Network. And basically, it's not too different to, say, the New Zealand School Trustees Association.
So if it makes sense and it's logical and it replicates what's happening overseas, why didn't you have it in the first instance? In other words, what this looks like is an ideological policy implemented because the government wanted to say thanks for your support that is now kind of being formed, to make sense.
Well, I think you're drawing a pretty long bow there with the greatest of respect, John. Look, there's many things I wish I'd got onto earlier, and as you get older, you probably start to feel that way too. But the fact is I don't have a time travel machine. What I can do is be part of the government that is giving a one-off conditional grant to an organisation that has a very high-profile board of very esteemed New Zealanders who are committed to making education better. And what they'll be doing is helping applicants strengthen their applications. They'll be helping schools develop their talent in terms of their school leaders and teachers and so on, and they'll be advocating for the sector, just like the Independent Schools Association does, just like the Catholic Schools Association.
So you've got 8 charter schools now. There was 9. Whangaruru's gone. You've got 8. What's your biggest role?
The biggest role would probably be Vanguard at about 154.
Right,
maybe
okay, so 150. So if I times 8 by 150, I get 1,200. So you've got 1,200 pupils in these schools so far. It's a hell of a...
Well, they're not all that high. So
no, you're right. Okay, sorry. So a maximum, so less than that.
For argument's sake, yeah.
Okay, for argument's sake. So under 1,200 kids. It's a lot of time, energy, resource, application, political discussion, toing and froing. Wouldn't it be better, as the Principals Federation says, and as your political opponents say, to invest in the public system and support the public system to do this work with, for example, disadvantaged kids?
Let me put the argument the other way, John. You make a very good point. This is tiny. This is 0.1% of the education budget, and it's about one student in 1,000 in New Zealand attending these schools. Wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where the New Zealand Principals Federation and the teachers' unions and other critics would say, look, sounds like you're doing something interesting. Early results are positive. No kids are being harmed. When it fails, you nip it in the bud very quickly. Good for you. Good for you. Why don't you go away?
When you fail, you nip it in the bud very quickly. You've had 9. One of them's failed at a cost of what, about $1.6 million? I mean, you know, that's slightly glib, isn't it? Nip it in the bud very quickly. Really?
No, it's not, John, because you've got to put these costs in the context of schools that are going to go on for a very long time. If you look at the early indications of the other ones, so if you were to do this, they actually sign 6-year renewable contracts, 6 by 6 by 6. So over the course of 8 schools over 18 years, if you want to start counting dollars and cents, what happened at Whangaruru, looking back, will not be important. What is important, John, is that we just got 100% pass rate for Year 13s at Te Kapahu Whetū and Whangarei. Now, what we're really trying to address here, and this is a real issue, is that university entrance pass rates for Pākehā are 58% and for Māori 32%. So basically twice as likely to get UE if you're Pākehā as if you're Māori. That's not the promise and the dream of New Zealand, and we're trying something new. And I make no apology for that. Yes, there are mistakes, but on balance, we're actually making an enormous difference in these kids' lives.
David Seymour, ACT Leader, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the program. We appreciate your time and we'd love your feedback on that. For or against, we'd love to hear from you. Text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Heavy rain across the west coast has caused flooding in Hokitika. Up to 25 mils of rain an hour has fallen in the region this afternoon, and a thunderstorm watch is in place. Gosh, it's pouring down. All rivers on the west coast are being monitored in case of further flooding. Andy Thompson from the Western Civil Defence joins us now at very short notice. Are you there, Andy?
Yeah, I am, John.
G'day, nice to talk to you. Is it coming down like in buckets, is it?
Well, it has been. Just currently it's not too bad, but we are expecting it to continue like this through to about 6 or 7 p.m. this evening. So we're hoping the worst is just about over, but it's still raining.
Yeah, there are some streets there that are prone to flooding. I remember a street in Hokitika in particular. Are they already experiencing surface flooding now?
Yeah, Rolleston Street, the one that we spoke about last time. Yes, it has had significant surface flooding. There's 8 to 10 houses that have got flooding. It hasn't actually got into the houses yet, but it's certainly in the garages and very, very close. So
those poor buggers, Andy. Should they be just bought out, because it's going to flood every time it rains there, isn't it?
Oh, no. So, John, what you might not know is actually I'm a counsellor here as well, so I also work with civil defence.
Excellent. Well, thank you. 2 for the price of 1, Andy. It's great to have you.
I know. So I thought you might bring this up. Look, we've got a $3 million plan which we're consultation on right now. By the 1st of July, this should have passed, and the most critical part is actually the Rolleston Street, Tankard Street. We've got 440,000 which is going to be invested in that area. We're changing pipes from currently between 150 to 250 mils to 900 millimetre pipes. So we are expecting this problem not to go away, because we're engineering to the national standard, which is about a 1 in 50 year event. But very quickly we're expecting this problem to be fixed to the best we can. I mean, we're on the west coast. We do have significant rainfall events. We can't say we are going to solve it 100%, but the money is being spent. The problem is it's just taking a little bit of time, and yes, we do feel desperately sorry for these people.
Okay, Andy, what is the forecast in the very short term? So over the next 24 hours, are you going to have to start moving people out of their homes, or are you hoping the worst has passed now?
Well, we do have an evacuation centre on standby if required. Civil Defence is obviously on standby, but the weather reports we're getting is this should come to an end sometime between 7, 8 o'clock tonight. If it doesn't and we get a high tide, then we might have some problems later this evening. But we're certainly monitoring it, and as soon as we can, we will, we'll be onto it. But we are expecting it to finish, and the 24-hour rainfall is supposed to be fine and sunny tomorrow, so we're looking forward to that.
Excellent. Andy Thompson, Westland Civil Defence, and as Andy said, a local councillor too. Thanks so much for your time this evening, Andy. We appreciate it. Recycling is back in the spotlight, this time in Queenstown. The Queenstown Lakes District Council has admitted that glass from residents' recycling bins is going to the landfill with the rubbish. The Deputy Mayor and Infrastructure Team Leader, Lyle Cox, says a communication glitch meant residents were not told what was happening. Mr Cox told our Queenstown reporter, Peter Newport, the market for recycled mixed glass has dropped to the point where contractors can't sell it.
For the mixed glass, has been taken over a period of time by Fulton Hogan down towards Cromwell there, and they've been crushing it and using it for roading material. Fulton Hogan have indicated or stopped taking it, and so we've been left with a product that we've had to dispose of, because without it being colour sorted, it's not an attractive product to be purchased by glass reusers and other, mainly up in Auckland. So, and as a temporary option, we've had to dispose of the glass back at the landfill, and we'll be looking at the options for collecting, colour sorting, and finding other markets for it.
So just so I understand, has something changed here? Has the bottom fallen out of the glass market, or have Fulton Hogan stuff?
Well, the market fluctuates, but it basically comes down to the type of product we've got to sell. The buyers for reusing the product like it. There's certain colours are more attractive than others, and they like it sorted. Otherwise, we can't sell it. A mixed glass product is not attractive, and that's why we've been, fortunate to have Fulton Hogan taking it and reusing it as a building material.
Do you think it's slightly misleading for the residents? Because we're all thinking we're doing the right thing, but I think most residents wouldn't think that recycling means landfill.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And there was, when we were discussing it a few weeks ago, the idea was to get the message out to the community. We had a wee bit of a hiccup in our internal system, and that didn't happen. It wasn't intentional, but we had to keep the community fully informed of what is actually happening to the recycling material.
So is it now the plan to basically go to the community and ask the residents to sort the glass, or what's the plan?
Well, under our current contracts, there's several contracts. They do come up for review. We are just working through that at the moment. We haven't got the option of colour sorting at the curb, so I'm waiting for a report back from the team to indicate what our best option is going forward.
Lyle Cox says in Wanaka, part of the same council territory, glass is already separated and is being recycled. Environmental groups will meet with the council next week to ask for reassurances that a solution will be found. And Lyle Cox was talking to our Queenstown reporter Peter Newport, who has been very busy filing for Checkpoint this week. Commemoration services will be held in Crete today to mark the 75th anniversary of the battle in which Allied troops fought to hold the Greek island against extreme odds. One of the really extraordinary conflicts of World War II, although boy, there were a lot of them. Back here, the family of the New Zealanders who served on Crete attended an emotional service in Wellington today. Our reporter Maya Burry was there.
Some people wept as the last post echoed through the Hall of Memories at the War Memorial Park in Wellington. Many of those who came to remember are relatives of the nearly 8,000 New Zealanders who fought on the Greek island. Among them, 93-year-old widow Joan O'Neill, who came on behalf of her husband Philip, a proud member of the 22nd Battalion that served on Crete. She says he lied about his age when he joined up and ended up becoming a prisoner of war.
He was captured, I think, about late May on Crete, and he was a prisoner of war on his 18th birthday in July. And he tried to escape a couple of times from prison camps.
Ms O'Neill says Philip eventually returned to New Zealand and he desperately wanted to make it to the 70th anniversary of the Second World War battle, but succumbed to cancer first. He would have been 94 next month. The Minister of Internal Affairs, Peter Dunn, says while many of the men who served in Crete are no longer alive, the anniversary is still very significant.
Every New Zealander has a memory, whether their family was involved or not, of the battle for Crete, because of the dramatic circumstances of the battle, because of the bonds that were forged between the Greek people, the Cretan people and New Zealand that have endured ever since. And I think it's very important that we commemorate this occasion.
Alongside Greece, Australia and Britain, New Zealand troops played a major part in the 12-day battle, but were hampered by a lack of weapons as they tried to stop a massive airborne invasion by German paratroopers. Outnumbered and outgunned, the Allies were forced to withdraw. 671 New Zealanders died, 967 were wounded, and more than 2,000 were taken prisoner. The Vice Chief of the Defence Force, Air Vice Marshal Kevin Short, says the battle strengthened defence ties with Greece.
A lot of those ties are related to that particular battle. We don't have what I call exchanges with them or exercise with them, but it actually goes back 75 years when we fought alongside each other. And they've never forgotten that support.
But the president of the Cretan Association of New Zealand, George Neonakis, says these days people often overlook the significance of the battle.
The Battle of Crete veterans are the forgotten Anzacs. We keep talking about Gallipoli. We need to keep in mind that we've got the Battle of Crete, you've got France, you've got Italy, where key soldiers actually fought. So we need to make sure that we don't forget these things.
Mr Neonakis says the next generation must continue to remember the Battle of Crete and those who lost their lives. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
4.5 to 6. You might imagine a festival dedicated to the world's greatest oyster is quite flash, but the tagline for the Bluff Oyster Festival, which starts tomorrow, is unsophisticated and proud of it. This year's festival has already been dubbed the most successful yet, with tickets completely sold out and a plane load of Aucklanders being flown down for the day by Air New Zealand. It's being held in the southern town for 25 years now and kicks off with the traditional piping in of the oyster and a recitation of the Ode to the Oyster. Spencer Morrison has been saying that ode for 2 decades and joins us now. Spencer, are you there?
I certainly am. John.
Yeah, it's lovely to talk to you. You're live on the wireless now, Spencer. Can you deliver your ode for us on Radio New Zealand National?
Yes, I'll do that for you.
Off you go, Spencer.
We put you on a pedestal, O oyster from the sea. You're such a delicious delicacy. That's where you deserve to be. We carry you from Fovo Strait to the safety of the shore and free you from your protective shell so the people can adore. A gem, a pearl set in Bluff's crown, so proudly we display our oyster in all its glory for all who are here today. O oyster, bounty of the sea, it gives us so much pleasure to proudly set before the world such a truly delectable treasure. Thank you.
Go, Spencer. How many will you eat tomorrow, Spencer?
I've just eaten a dozen just a wee while ago.
Oh, don't say that on the radio. How were they? How did you just have them raw?
Just beautiful, yeah, just lovely.
Oh, so what's your favourite way of having them? Just straight out of the shell?
Yes, correct. Yes, definitely.
Oh, that's cool. That's cruel and unusual punishment to say that to people who can't get them yet, Spencer.
Oh, hell.
It's magic
anyway,
down there.
They are wonderful.
Yeah, and they
are world class.
Yeah, they're the best there is, isn't there? And they can only come from one place, Fovo Strait, right?
Yeah, that is correct, my friend. Yes, that is true.
Now, Spencer,
and through the Port of Bluff.
Yeah. Now, what will you be wearing tomorrow, Spencer? We want to know this. I have a sneaking suspicion you might be in a kilt. Is that right?
Well, actually, I don't wear the kilt now. I wear trews, which is the tartan trews.
Yeah.
Mainly because I'm a bit older and I feel the cold. But yes, it's the Scottish part. I started, as you say, roughly 20 years ago with the pipe band, we always pipe the oysters.
Yeah.
Of course, one thing leads to the other.
Yeah, well, it does when you have oysters, doesn't it, Spencer? Eh?
Yes, it does.
Lovely to talk to you, Spencer. I hope you have a wonderful day tomorrow. Have an oyster for me and for Katrina.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thanks for coming on the wireless. Spencer from Bluff, who does the Ode to the Oyster and has been doing it for 2 decades. So much feedback coming in on Paula Bennett and the issue of homelessness. Good on you, Paula Bennett, and the interviewer, that was Peter Newport, for allowing us to see the complexity of the situation rather than insisting there's one size fits all. Says Deb. The Minister of Social Housing really out of touch with reality. Boy, this is polarised, people. Listening to Paula Bennett speak on New Zealand's very, very real housing problem is like being asked to drink a distasteful cup of disingenuous Kool-Aid. It's interesting that she said it's not an issue of money when all of the minister's rhetoric speaks of the generosity of the government. Her tweet is a prime example, says Simon. John, surely the issue with homelessness is a lot to do with the increasing unaffordability of rents. And in fact, yes, that's a point we're going to discuss with the Salvation Army out in Waitakere after 6 o'clock. Minister Bennett, once she finally manages to front up to Checkpoint RNZ, says we need to encourage people to move up as if people love living in poverty. It's a drug and alcohol issue as if all poor families have those problems, and no housing crisis. Denial ain't a river in Egypt, Paula. Thank you for all your feedback from both sides of the spectrum. We appreciate it. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's 6 o'clock. Thank you for being with us. Half an hour to go in a week, and during that time, we're going to take you out to Waitakere and talk to the Salvation Army. Who are they dealing with out west in Auckland? And what is the issue of homelessness like out there? Surprising increase in the number of working poor seeking their services. That's coming up. Why a program that's helped tens of thousands of parents is being scrapped. And we talk sport, which we like to do on a Friday night. But before all of that, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, says there is no housing crisis in New Zealand and ongoing problems have been the case for some time. Yesterday, RNZ reported that officials from the Ministry of Social Development told the Minister a year ago that the emergency housing sector was incoherent, unfair and unaccountable. Paula Bennett, speaking in a Checkpoint interview, says there's always been people in need and the sector is not in crisis.
Well, I certainly wouldn't call it a crisis. You know, I think that we've always had people in need. So the other night on TV, I heard the homeless story was, you know, sort of second in, and then the 7th story was a man who'd been 30 years living on the street. So that's decades.
Paula Bennett says many of the homeless have mental health or alcohol and drug issues that need to be worked on over time. She says Housing New Zealand has been given more money to provide more housing. Egypt's aviation minister says while it's too soon to say why the Egypt airplane crashed, a terrorist attack is more likely than technical issues. Questions by reporters, Sharif Fathi says it was more likely it was terrorism, not a mechanical fault. The plane disappeared over the southern Mediterranean yesterday with 66 people aboard. No wreckage has been confirmed yet. The minister says so far no security concerns have been raised about passengers and crew. The Undersecretary to the Minister of Education says the government is funding more charter schools because of positive results. David Seymour says next week's budget will include money for another 7 of the publicly funded private schools. He says there's enough proof to justify funding more.
There's a lot of positive momentum behind the schools. The initial reports from the evaluation by Martin Jenkins has been overwhelmingly positive, as have the Education Review Office reports. As have the majority of the academic results to date. However, we're not placing a lot of store on those because the schools are so new.
David Seymour says the new schools will need about $500,000 each for set-up, with further funding depending on their size. Opponents of charter schools say there's little hard evidence the schools are doing better than state schools. The West Coast Civil Defence is on standby after flooding and heavy rain that's left up to 10 houses flooded in Hokitika this afternoon. Rainfall of up to 25 millimetres an hour is expected to continue for at least another hour, and Met Service is warning of possible thunderstorms. Westland District Council staff are continuing to watch the region's rivers with high tide later tonight and monitor low-lying areas in Hokitika. Greenpeace is dismissing the fishing industry's criticism of an international report that highlights the dumping of fish and underreporting of catch in New Zealand. The Sea Around Us report found New Zealand's true catch is almost 3 times higher than officially reported. Seafood New Zealand says the report is unscientific and written by activist academics with an anti-fishing agenda. But Greenpeace's Executive Director Russell Norman says Ministry for Primary Industry reports that were leaked this week prove fish dumping and underreporting are rampant.
The fact is that the Auckland University report showed large levels of dumping and non-reporting, and then the Ministry of Primary Industries reports showed large levels of dumping and non-reporting of catch. These things are entirely consistent, and the seafood industry would do better just to read the reports.
Greenpeace's Executive Director Russell Norman. The owners of the Scenic Hotel Group say they'll be suing the Labour leader Andrew Little for defamation. Earl and Lani Hagerman had told Mr Little he had until 5 p.m. today to apologise for comments he made about them in the media, but he's refused to do so. Benedict Collins reports.
The Hagermans say, having received no apology, they will now go ahead with the case. Mr Little asked the Auditor-General to investigate after Earl Hagerman donated $101,000 to the National Party in September 2014. The following month, the Scenic Hotel Group was awarded a government contract to manage the Matavai Resort in Niue. The Hagermans have also welcomed an investigation by the Auditor-General. Mr Little says he has written to the Hagermans' lawyers, saying he has a constitutional duty to challenge the actions of the government over the expenditure of public funds. He says he will address the issues raised by the Hagermans once the Auditor-General has dealt with the issue. From Parliament, Benedict Collins.
A person has been treated for a broken leg after a minibus crashed down a bank and into a paddock in Waikato. Emergency services were called to the scene on Arapuni Road early this afternoon. Firefighters rescued the 9 passengers. The New Zealand golfer Danny Lee has made a fast start to the latest PGA Tour event in Texas. The 25-year-old is in a share for the lead at the AT&T Byron Nelson after carding a bogey-free 7-under 63. Fellow New Zealander Tim Wilkinson is 4 shots back in a tie for 28th. The British Olympic long jump champion Greg Rutherford has cited the case of New Zealand shot putter Valerie Adams as a reason why athletics chief should retest all competitors from the London Games in order to help clean up the sport. Adams was eventually awarded the gold medal after the London Olympics when Belarusian Nadzia Ostapchuk was stripped of the title for failing a drugs test. It was revealed this week that the International Olympic Committee is awaiting the results of 250 retests from the last Summer Olympics, but Rutherford says he'd like all samples resubmitted.
I remember in 2012 when Valerie Adams missed out on her medal ceremony in the stadium, and that was gutting for her, and that was straight after proving that the person who took her gold medal was a drugs cheat, and that's wrong. So we're saying there's going to be 250 from London. Why not test everybody's again? The chemists believe that there's always ways to manipulate these drugs, so we need to keep testing, keep retesting.
British Olympic long jump champion Greg Rutherford. And the Cleveland Cavaliers have taken a 2-0 lead in the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals after beating the Toronto Raptors 108-89. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Richard may be regarded by many as Britain's greatest nature writer on life's rich cabaret of plants. The argument about whether powerful people tend to behave antisocially. And Sarah McIntyre, an artist like her father Peter, but with a camera, not a brush. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Periods of rain tomorrow with possible squally thunderstorms. Gale southwesterlies in Auckland and Northland later tomorrow, possibly severe. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country. Rain spreading north today with squally thunderstorms in western areas. Rain then gradually easing from the south tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional rain tomorrow. Wellington, Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, rain at times, clearing tomorrow and becoming fine apart from a few showers lingering in Banks Peninsula and Wairarapa. Southwest gales for coastal Canterbury tomorrow. Buller Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain and squally thunderstorms clearing in Fiordland this evening and becoming fine everywhere tomorrow. Otago and Southland, showers clearing this afternoon, then returning overnight. And the Chatham Islands, rain and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. Don't put the washing out just in case. It's 8:30
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Have a fantastic weekend.
You too.
I will. See you Monday. Terrorism, that is the main theory of what brought down an Egypt airplane travelling from Paris to Cairo more than 24 hours ago. By the way, we do have more on homelessness coming up. Search and rescue teams are still scouring the Mediterranean Sea for flight MS-804, which disappeared with 66 passengers and crew on board. Until it's found, the cause of this tragic event won't be known. However, US authorities are speculating a bomb may have brought the plane down. CNN's John Berman with what is known so far.
11:09 p.m. Egypt Air Flight 804 departs from Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris is scheduled, the beginning of a 4-hour flight to Cairo. 2 hours after takeoff, the Airbus 320 crosses into Greek airspace. The pilot checks in with air traffic control. 24 minutes later, another routine check-in just south of Athens. All is fine. At 2:27 a.m., less than an hour away from landing, the plane is cruising above the Mediterranean Sea at 37,000 feet, about to cross into Egyptian airspace. It's time for another check-in with air traffic control, but there is no word from the flight. The plane abruptly swerves, then rapidly drops. At 2:29, it disappears from radar. The Egyptian and Greek military immediately mount a search and rescue operation, but the plane is nowhere to be found. Egyptian authorities say there was no distress call, though a distress signal was picked up nearly 2 hours after the plane dropped off the radar. It is unclear if this was from the missing plane. Experts say this type of rapid plunge is usually caused by a catastrophic event. So, was this a deliberate act? The Egyptian aviation minister announcing he believes this was likely an act of terror instead of a technical malfunction. The investigation into the flight shows the plane made stops in Eritrea and Tunisia before picking up passengers in Paris. The plane and crew did undergo a security sweep before taking off for Cairo, and Egypt Air officials confirmed the plane passed all maintenance checks before the flight. The weather in the area of the flight path was clear and calm. U.S. officials suspect the plane was taken down by a bomb, though they stress this theory is circumstantial.
We have seen a desire on the part of extremists around the world, including some extremists in the Middle East, to carry out attacks targeting the international aviation system. So, we obviously are mindful of that, and here in the United States, we've experienced the pain of those aviation-borne attacks firsthand on 9/11.
So far, no claims of responsibility from any terrorist group for this downed plane. Anguished family members arrived at the airports in Cairo and Paris to wait for word on their loved ones. 66 souls were on board the flight, most of them French and Egyptian citizens. Among them, 3 children. 2 were just infants.
6:11. We return now to the issue of homelessness. This week on Checkpoint, we've spoken to people living in their cars, people whose WINS-approved emergency housing is costing them up to $1,300 a week, money they have to borrow from WINS and then repay, and people crowded into small homes and garages. Today I went to the Salvation Army in Waitakere, West Auckland, to talk to people who's, help those in need. Rhonda Middleton has been the operations manager for the Salvation Army in Henderson there, Waitakere, for 15 years. Earlier in the program tonight, Rhonda showed us the lockers they put up outside the building so people sleeping rough have somewhere to store their few possessions. Now Rhonda takes us inside the Henderson premises to tell us about who they're seeing and what they're trying to achieve for them.
Our main focus is, and I say to my team all the time, how do we stay to the point where we're not another place that is saying no? How do we actually say, we might not have the answer today, but here's some options. But quite often my team's amazing. A lot of them are volunteers, and they just look at the need, and we find a solution. And it can take a while, but...
How great is the need now?
So the need is definitely higher. That I think that the need is also at a different level. We used to work at quite a low and medium need. We're now working at quite a high need. So people will come in with multiple multiple things that are happening in their lives. They may be having massive budget issues. Housing is a problem. Parenting is an issue. There may be family violence is something that usually comes out after a wee while once they trust us. But you're working with people who don't just come in with one need but with multiple needs, and how do we love and support them. But also the other thing we love to do here is give them a place to contribute, and so a lot of the people who have come in also become part of the team, and for me that's a massive win.
There's a terrible word that I hate, which is called underclass, but can I use it as a shorthand?
Yeah.
So we talk about the underclass as people who might use a facility like this, but I sense there's a change in that you're seeing an increasing number of working poor. Is that the case?
Yeah, so I've been here a long time, about 15 years, and when I first started it was probably around 5 to 10% of the people we were seeing, and it was very surprising if they came in but they were working, but now we're looking at about 30% of our clients are coming in on their lunch breaks for food, getting time off to have appointments for budgeting, and that's not always easy either because their employees don't always understand, but we are working a lot more with people who are working.
Roughly a third of your clients now have jobs.
That's right. So it's difficult because usually in the past, if they're on a benefit, we'd be able to help them get into training or looking for jobs, but they're already in a job. How do we get them to a point where their income is more? Because the issue that we have is that income is not enough.
And is it housing that is the biggest expense for these people?
So housing, if I'm just going off what I know, so not perfect stats, but people are paying well over 70% of their income, sometimes a lot more, just to pay for the rent. So what do they do? How do they pay for their car, petrol, food, electricity, which is just about to go up again? How do we keep paying for that, as well as keep on saying to them it's going to be all right, because they're living week to week. Also, the other thing we see a lot with the working people is if they're solo mums and they need time off for sick kids, they lose their jobs very quickly. So you feel like you've got them to a point, but then they can go backwards so quickly because they're by themselves trying to make things work, but they're still trying to be mums, dads, and life is not always easy.
And yet they're doing what we ask of them, right? I mean, if people are being crass, they will say, get a job and everything will be okay. They've got a job and everything isn't okay.
Yeah. So their income is so low, so often they're not working on a high wage, they're working on the minimum wage, and they then also lose some of their benefits from WINS. And so sometimes their dignities, I do see when they start work that they go, oh, yay, I feel like I've come to a step, but it doesn't usually change their lifestyle. It's still hard. It is still week to week all the time, and all it takes is one bill, a tyre going on a car, a kid's school camp, new school uniforms, because we seem to be changing school uniforms all the time at the moment. Our people at the beginning of this year really struggled. And we're thinking there were some people who had 3 kids at one school who needed a blazer. I don't know how to fix that, except that we tried to help. We came up with fundraising. We helped them get their blazers, because we don't want people to feel like they are the underclass. We want them to fit in. Everyone just wants to fit in. And so making sure they've got lunches, making sure they've got the right school uniforms. How do we do that? How do we work with them?
Empowering you with choice, the traditional model of food banks, at least as I understand them, is that someone gives you a box or a bag, and that's that. Yeah. Whereas, how's this one working now?
So this is a new model we're trying out. We've realised that people know what they need, and they know what their family eats. We knew a lot of people were taking food if we were giving them a box with specific things in, but it would sit in their pantry or they wouldn't know what to do with it. So now we let them come in, depending on how many adults and children in their home, they get so many items they can choose. It's been so exciting. So it's only 2 weeks old, this model, but they come in, and to see them planning their meals and saying, if I get that, then I get some of this, and oh my goodness, that's my favourite thing. But even just things like hair products, beauty products, things like that, they know what they want to use, and all of us need a bit of feeling good about ourselves, and so it's so cool to see. The other really encouraging thing for us is that we did think maybe with this model they'll be using a lot of soft drinks and things like that, which we do have here, but people are really making wise, sensible decisions because they're feeding their families, and these people do know how to feed their families. I think sometimes we think, I hear a lot of people saying, well, they'll just waste it, but actually these people take it so seriously. They know what their family needs, and have a lot less junk than I do.
How long have you been doing this for? You've been here for 15 years, have you?
Yes, so I've worked for the Salvation Army for 15 years and have been based at West Auckland for that whole time.
And how has it changed over that period? We talked before about the working poor, so suddenly you have way more people with jobs coming in. What else has changed?
So definitely the money lending, the high interest loan sharks that are out there, our people that have multiple loans that they owe. So how do they ever get out of that? So when we start doing budgets with them, sitting with them, it is just sometimes they feel hopeless because the interest rates sometimes are hitting at 500% for something they've bought. How do they work through that when also they're coming into us because their car's broken down, so they need to be able to fix that again. So probably that loan area is a massive area, and it's the marginalised, the people, our clients who have been targeted, and also the other thing that I'm seeing is it is the working poor, but also the rents are just shocking. Our people have to find a house. WINs are helpful because they do give out, they are helpful to our people with bonds and things like that, but then they have to live in that day, week to week. They have to live with the high rents that they're paying, and really they have no choice. And it's a vicious cycle of how do I pay for things, and it seems to be that their debt just increases all the time. So,
are people desperate?
Oh, very desperate. Just in this new food bank model, they come in here, and the point that we've tried to give them dignity and empowerment, they're overwhelmed because they're desperate to feed their families. I don't think any parent gets up in the morning and thinks of anything but how do I look after my children well, and 99% of the parents that come in here, they want to be good parents, they want to provide for their families, and it's just a desperation because of the cycle that has happened in their lives.
That's Rhonda Middleton. Rhonda is the operations manager for the Salvation Army in Waitakere. The premises is based in Henderson. They cover West Auckland. Never been busier. 6:20. A program that's helped tens of thousands of parents over its 25-year existence is to be scrapped. The government is moving the funding for parents as first teachers to a more targeted program because it says that's where the help is needed. Here's our deputy political editor, Chris Bramwell.
Parents as First Teachers has been running since 1991 and is offered in 36 locations around the country. Parent educators make personal visits to families and give guidance as children grow and develop. Robbie Harrington is one of those educators. Based out of Wellington's Space NZ Trust, she's gutted to hear the programme's days are numbered.
Very upset, actually. I probably feel better if I know that there's some alternative available to our families. I mean, I'm just very upset for them. Yeah, it's not a good feeling.
From October, the annual $7.3 million in funding will go to a more targeted program, Family Start. But Robbie Harrington says Parents as First Teachers has actually been targeted for a very long time.
Because in Wellington particularly, we don't have Family Start or Early Start or any of those other intervention programs for the vulnerable. We have ended up with a lot of very, very needy families. I mean, we've got a list of criteria for our families, and a lot of our 105 families we're funded for have 4 or 5 criteria. So, I mean, they are vulnerable families.
Murray Edridge from the Ministry of Social Development says it was just not sure how effective the program was.
There are a number of anecdotal things and a number of reports that indicate, yes, it will add some value. The question is, does it add as much value as something like Family Start, which is more intensively focused and more focused at a client base that has a higher level of need.
Plunkett also delivers the program. Its acting chief executive, Amanda Malu, is more circumspect about losing the funding.
It was a successful program in its day. I think what we've discovered recently with a lot of these sorts of programs is they're not having the impact on the highest needs families. So we understand the focus on investing at in the families that need the help and assistance the most.
That's certainly singing from the same song sheet as the Social Development Minister, Anne Tolley, who says making the money more targeted fits with the government's social investment approach. She acknowledges there are some families who will now not get home visits, but other families who are currently missing out will be able to get support. But Labour's health spokesperson, Annette King, says killing off the program is a huge disappointment.
Every child in New Zealand should get the best start in life from before birth up to the age of 3. What this means is that certainly money is going to go to those who need it, but it's been taken off those that you probably call middle families. And I think that's the move in the wrong direction. It should be available for every child, every parent.
The Ministry of Social Development says the Parents as First teachers' contracts have been extended until the end of September, so providers have time to work through the transition phase, including sorting out any employment issues. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Chris Bramwell.
6:23 on Checkpoint on Friday night. John Greaves is along with Well Watch PM at 6:30, which is not very far away at all. So much feedback tonight. Convert shipping containers into small sleep-out units clustered around a facilities block. Not ideal, but better than living in a car, says Robert. Paula Bennett has just declared the housing problem is not new. It's been there for some time. After so many years in government, does she seriously think this is a defence, says Myra from Levin. Just to clarify a point of David Seymour's, exploring charter schools is not doing something new. It's doing something that has been done in numerous other education systems that are achieving lower results than New Zealand internationally. If David Seymour is truly interested in raising outcomes for New Zealand kids, perhaps he should look to empowering the professionals in education and removing educationally feeble policies like national standards, which serve to narrow what's taught and, more importantly, are wrongly used to determine success or failure. Plainly, the money that's put into charter schools should be directed to supporting a rich, holistic and balanced curriculum that celebrates a diversity of achievement. Sorry, that's an edit of something I've already said. You have no need to apologise. That was sent by text. It's miraculous you managed to send that by text. Good evening, John. Who the heck is Minister Bennett kidding? All week we have had wall-to-wall grim factual stories of whole families living in cars, garages and in Wynn's so-called emergency motel housing paid for by the desperate. Then a report saying a year ago the emerging housing sector is a virtual car crash. Paula Bennett and Nick Smith should simply do the decent thing and resign. They both aren't fit for purpose. I'm ashamed to be living in New Zealand now, says Graham of Whangarei. Thank you all for your feedback. Big weekend of sport happening here and abroad. Rugby league, golf, league, or rugby league, God, whatever. Matt Chatterton is sitting beside me. It's Friday night. I've hit the wall, Matt. You just talk. We've got 4.5 minutes ago. You just start talking now.
Geez, all right.
It's lovely to have you here, Matt. Tonight, Super Rugby, Crusaders, Waratahs. We should point out to people listening who don't like rugby, the Crusaders are from Canterbury and the Waratahs are from New South Wales, Sydney-based, right?
Yep, sure are. The Crusaders are arguably the most successful team.
Well, they're not arguably, that's factually. That's factually.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
as much as it pains me as a Hurricanes supporter to say that.
Yeah, well, see, I had to, be somewhat objective there, coming from Canterbury myself. So yeah, but no, it's the Crusaders versus Waratahs tonight.
Waratahs minus Kurtley Beale. He was.
Yeah, he's been ruled out of the rest of the campaign with an injury he picked up in like the first minute of the game last week that he was playing in over in Australia. Crusaders, Waratahs, last two times the teams have played, the Waratahs have won. Last year in particular, when it pretty much ended the Crusaders' chances of making the playoffs of the Super Rugby competition. That's sort of still grating on the Crusaders this year. I mean, you've got the likes of Gerald Gibson, the former assistant coach of the Crusaders, is now coaching the Waratahs.
Former Crusaders player too, right?
Exactly. And Zach Guilford plays for the Waratahs, and he'll be making an appearance in the blue jersey against his former team tonight. So promises to be a good game.
Where is it? Is it in Christchurch or Sydney?
It's in Christchurch. The Waratahs are on top of the Australian competition ladder. And
although that's not saying much, is it? I mean, it's like being on top of a cardboard box.
Well, it is a little bit, isn't it? And the Crusaders are on top of the New Zealand ladder, so it does promise to be big. But then tomorrow, the Chiefs are playing the Rebels. Rebels have had a pretty good season so far, and I mean,
Chiefs from Waikato, Rebels from
Melbourne. Yep, and they are, if depending on how it goes, the Crusaders and the Chiefs are both on the same amount of points. The Crusaders are technically first, and the Crusaders are first, Chiefs are second on points differential. Depending on how the two games go overnight, it could split and the Chiefs could go to the top, Crusaders slip to second. So it sort of depends on how those games play out. The Hurricanes and Highlanders have the bye. The Blues are playing the Force tomorrow after the Chiefs game.
Okay, Blues are playing the Force. Where's that? Oh, they're coming home.
No, they're playing in Perth. So yeah,
Right.
it's a later game. So that should.
Gosh, the Force are an odd team. You just can't pick them
They're
at
a
all,
bogey
can you?
team
Yeah,
for
they are.
New Zealand. Particularly the Crusaders.
The Blues
Yeah.
have to win that. Right,
They
what else
do.
are we going to talk about? League. Kieran Foran.
Yes, so he has returned. You may remember a couple of 3 weeks ago, in fact, that Kieran Foran, who plays league for the Parramatta Eels and the New Zealand Kiwis team, he got granted leave from the Parramatta Eels to deal with some personal issues. He went into rehab overseas, has come back. And is playing. He's going to be playing back for the Eels on Monday against the Melbourne Storm in the National Rugby League competition, and then he's actually going back into rehab. But his doctors have said it's the best thing for him at the moment is to play some football and then go back and deal with his stuff outside of that.
And the Warriors are playing Canberra in New Plymouth.
Yes. So it's a bit of a homecoming for Isaac Luke, the Warriors hooker. He grew up in Hawera, so yeah, a bit of a homecoming for him. The Warriors playing the Canberra Raiders, rather. Big game, really. Both teams need a win. Canberra Raiders are in top 8, or it might be 9th actually, and the Warriors are in 13th. So both teams need to get a roll on to improve that.
Right, a minute and 10 seconds before Katrina's along with the news headlines. Joseph Parker fighting tomorrow night, right? And Manukau here in Auckland.
Yes, he is. He's fighting Carlos Takam, who was born in Cameroon but lives in France. Big fight for him. The winner of this fight gets a mandatory challenge at the International Boxing Federation's heavyweight title, which is currently held by a British boxer just a couple of years older than Joseph Parker by the name of Anthony Joshua. So that would be a big opportunity for Parker, who has been trying to crack that world heavyweight title for a while now, and it's literally only one fight away. So big moment for him. And this Carlos Takam is no easy beat either. He has a record of 33 wins, 2 losses. One of them was by knockout, but that was by a guy who just earlier this week was caught having meldonium in his system, so banned substance, and 1 draw. So it promises to be a
cracker.
Big fight.
Matt Chatterton was like an encyclopedia with legs when it comes to sport. Thanks, Matt. It's really lovely to end the week talking with you. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll be back on Monday night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, denies there's a housing crisis in New Zealand. Up to 10 houses have been flooded in Hokitika due to heavy rain, and more rain is on the way. Greek, Egyptian, French and British military units are searching the waters off Greece's Carpathos Islands for any sign of the missing EgyptAir plane. There's frustration and disappointment among teacher and principal groups over the government's decision to fund more charter schools. And the Queenstown Lakes District Council admits glass from curbside recycling bins is not being recycled. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, the US continues sanctions on Myanmar, a dramatic increase